Dawn breaks over the waters. Off Mylae, northern Sicily, in the year 260 before the Common Era, the Mediterranean glows amber and gold as mist lifts from the surface. Two fleets face each other across the morning light. 130 Carthaginian warships hold perfect formation, their bronze rams catching the sun, their crews moving with the practiced grace of men born to the sea. Opposite them, Rome's makeshift navy waits, crude vessels built in desperate haste, crewed by farmers who learned to row on dry land just months before. Aboard the Carthaginian flagship, Admiral Hannibal Gisco squints through the clearing fog. His officers gather around him, pointing at the Roman vessels. Strange wooden contraptions rise from each enemy prow, tall poles with what appear to be bridges mounted vertically, waiting. The Carthaginian captains begin to laugh. The sound carries across the water, joining with laughter from other ships as word spreads about the Roman devices. These are farmers playing at sailors, land fighters who built something they think will work at sea. Carthage has ruled these waters for 3 centuries. Their shipwrights have built vessels since before Rome was more than a village of mud huts. Their sailors trained from childhood in the arts of ramming, maneuvering, reading wind and current. What could these amateurs possibly have invented that matters? Gisco signals the attack. His ships surge forward with oars moving in flawless synchronization, each crew rowing as one organism, the kind of coordination that comes only from years of practice and tradition. The bronze rams cut through water, aimed at Roman hulls. This will be over quickly. Another lesson taught to those who think they can challenge Carthaginian supremacy. As the distance closes, those strange devices suddenly swing outward. The bridges drop with terrible force. Iron spikes pierce Carthaginian decks. The bridges lock the ships together. And then, impossibly, Roman soldiers come storming across these boarding bridges, turning the sea battle into exactly the kind of land fight where Rome has never lost. The laughter dies in Carthaginian throats. 4 years earlier, in the late afternoon light of a Roman spring, the Senate House fills with voices raised in argument, maps of Sicily spread across tables between marble columns. The debate has raged for hours. The question before them seems simple, but opens onto an abyss of consequences. Messina, a city at the northeastern tip of Sicily, is asked for Roman protection against both Syracuse and Carthage. It is a trap, obviously. The Mamertines who hold Messana are mercenaries and thieves who seized the city by betrayal. Helping them violates every principle of Roman justice. Yet, the strategic reality cannot be ignored. An elderly senator rises, his toga arranged with patrician precision. Sicily has always been someone else's problem, he reminds the chamber. Greek colonies fighting each other, Carthaginian trading. Posts, local tyrants rising and falling. Rome's power ends at the Italian coastline. It has always ended there. Why should Roman citizens die for a city of mercenaries? But another voice counters, younger, sharper. If Carthage controls all of Sicily, they control the strait. They could launch invasions into southern Italy itself. The Carthaginians are already the dominant maritime power in the western Mediterranean. Should Rome allow them to plant their standard within sight of the Italian coast? The argument circles and returns, circles again. In the end, the Senate cannot agree. The question goes to the popular assembly, where the citizens of Rome, perhaps thinking more of glory and less of consequences, vote to intervene. 2 legions will cross to Messana. Consul Appius Claudius Caudex will lead them. It is meant to be a limited intervention, a show of force, nothing more. Just enough to keep Carthage from owning the entire island. The crossing succeeds. The legions march across the narrow strait and garrison Messana. The immediate crisis resolves. For a few months, it seems manageable. Rome has demonstrated its willingness to act. Carthage takes note, but does not immediately respond with force. Perhaps this can be contained. Perhaps the merchants of Carthage will calculate that Sicily is not worth a full war with Rome. But then Carthage does respond, and Syracuse joins the conflict, and suddenly the limited intervention becomes something much larger. The war that neither side particularly wanted has begun. Later, historians will call it the First Punic War, though no one in the year 264 knows there will be a second and third. They know only that Rome and Carthage, The two great powers of the Western Mediterranean are now locked in conflict over an island neither can afford to concede. The Roman legions march through Sicily, and for a while, everything goes according to familiar patterns. When Carthaginian armies meet them on open ground, Roman discipline crushes them. The legions are everything their reputation promises: organized, relentless, professional. The Carthaginian forces, composed largely of mercenaries from a dozen different peoples, cannot match Roman cohesion in pitched battle. City after city falls to Roman siege. The war seems winnable through traditional Roman methods: superior infantry, systematic siege warfare, grinding patience. But then the pattern breaks. The Romans lay siege to Panormus, a major Carthaginian base on Sicily's northern coast. They build their siege camps, cut the roads, settle in for the long work of starving the garrison. The city's walls are strong, but Roman engineering is stronger. Given time, the legions will breach those walls. The defenders know it, the Romans know it, everyone waits. Then, one night, ships appear. Carthaginian vessels sail into Panormus harbor under cover of darkness. They bring reinforcements, weapons, food. In the morning, the garrison is stronger than it was the day before. The Romans tighten their siege lines. Another month passes. Again, ships arrive. Again, the garrison is resupplied. The siege that should have succeeded drags on without resolution. The same pattern repeats at Lilybaeum, at Drepana, at every coastal fortress. The Roman army can win every land battle, can surround every city, but it cannot close the one avenue that matters. The Mediterranean is Carthage's highway, and Rome has no way to block it. Roman commanders stand on hills overlooking the sea, watching helplessly as enemy vessels sail in and out with impunity. The most powerful army in the Italian peninsula is rendered impotent by its inability to control the water. In the Roman Senate, the realization settles like cold stone. They cannot win this war with legions alone. Sicily is an island. Islands require ships. Carthage has ships. Rome does not in any meaningful military sense. They have merchant vessels, fishing boats, coastal traders. But warships, proper naval galleys with bronze rams and trained crews, the kind needed to challenge Carthaginian naval supremacy. Rome has never built such things. Their entire military tradition is built on land warfare, on the heavy infantry tactics that conquered Italy. The sea is foreign territory, as alien as the deserts of Africa. The debate in the Senate is brief and grim. The financial cost will be enormous. The human cost, training crews who have never sailed warships, is impossible to calculate. Every Roman understands that they are contemplating something unprecedented. They are farmers and soldiers, not sailors. The Greeks are sailors. The Phoenicians and their Carthaginian descendants are sailors. Romans plant crops and march in formation and build roads. They do not build fleets. But the alternative is accepting defeat. The Senate issues the decree in the spring of 261. Rome will build a fleet, 100 quinqueremes, the largest warships of the age, plus 20 smaller triremes. The senators who vote for this understand they are authorizing something insane. None of them knows if it will work. Orders go out to the Greek cities of southern Italy, to Syracuse, to Naples, to any community with maritime knowledge. Send shipwrights, send naval architects, send anyone who knows how to build a warship. Rome will pay whatever it costs. The response is mixed. Some Greek cities, allied to Rome or fearful of Carthage, send their best craftsmen. Others hold back, skeptical that Roman silver can buy what takes generations to learn. Then, fortune delivers an unexpected gift. A Carthaginian quinquereme, raiding the Sicilian coast, runs aground near Messana. Perhaps the captain miscalculated the tides, or perhaps a sudden storm drove them onto rocks. Whatever the cause, the ship is stranded. Roman soldiers swarm over it before the crew can burn it. The vessel is captured intact. Roman engineers arrive within days. They measure every dimension of the Carthaginian warship, study every joint and timber, examine the arrangement of the rowing benches, the position of the mast, the design of the ram. They sketch and calculate, taking the ship apart piece by piece in their minds before they ever touch hammer to wood. This Carthaginian quinquereme built by craftsmen whose families have been building ships for generations, becomes the template. If Rome cannot design its own warships from experience, it will copy from those who can. Shipyards along the Italian coast explode into activity. At Ostia, at Antium, at every harbor and inlet, timber is dragged down from the hills. Oak for the frames, fir and pine for planking. Forests that took decades to grow fall in weeks. The sound of saws and hammers fills the air from dawn until full darkness. The Senate has demanded the impossible, and so the impossible must be attempted. At the same time, another problem presents itself. Ships without crews are useless. Rome needs thousands of men who can row war galleys, who understand the complex coordination required to drive a quinquereme at ramming speed, who can maneuver in formation during the chaos of battle. These skills take years to learn. Rome has months at best. The solution emerges from necessity and Roman pragmatism. If the men cannot train at sea, they will train on land. Near the shipyards, on flat ground overlooking the water, workers build practice ships. These are not actual vessels, but wooden frameworks, skeleton ships made of timber frames. Rowing benches are installed in exact formation, matching the positions they will occupy in real galleys. Hundreds of benches, arranged in the complex patterns of quinqueremes, where 5 men work together to drive each massive oar. The recruits arrive. They are drawn from Rome's lower classes, from the citizens who own too little property to serve in the legions as heavy infantry, farmers from the Campanian plains, laborers from Roman building projects, freedmen looking for wages and citizenship advancement. Some have seen the sea, most have not, none have rowed a war galley. They look at the wooden practice frames with expressions ranging from determination to bewilderment. Among them is Marcus, a smallholder from the countryside south of Rome. His farm is small, barely enough to support his wife and 3 children, worked by his own hands with help from one elderly slave too old for heavy labor. The military summons came during plowing season. His wife wept when he left, not from sentiment, but from practical fear. Who will harvest the grain? Who will repair the roof before the autumn rains? But orders are orders, and Marcus is Roman enough to understand that personal hardship matters less than the Republic's needs. He arrived at the coastal training grounds with a small bag of belongings and a complete absence of illusions about his seafaring abilities. The training masters are mostly Greeks, borrowed from allied cities or hired for silver. They look at their Roman students with professional skepticism. One of them, a weathered Syracusan named Pythias, whose family has been sailing for generations, walks among the benches as the men settle into position. His Latin carries a heavy Greek accent, but his meaning is clear. Rowing a quinquereme is not like rowing a fishing boat. It is not individual effort, it is collective rhythm. Every man must move as one. Pull at the wrong moment and you foul the oar of the man beside you. Pull too weakly and the ship slows. Pull too strongly and the oar breaks. You are not individual rowers. You are one organism with 300 arms. The Romans listen, sitting on wooden benches that do not move, holding practice oars that pull nothing but air. Pythias stands at the front in the position that will belong to the Celeustes, the rowing master. He begins to call rhythm, and the Romans begin to row. Oars forward, pull back, lift, forward again. The movements are simple in concept, brutal in execution, hour after hour, day after day. The Romans drill until their hands bleed and their backs scream. Some laugh at the madness of it, practicing swimming motions on dry land. Others grimace with determination. All of them understand what failure means. If they cannot learn this, the war is lost. Marcus discovers that farming has prepared him better than he expected. Plowing requires rhythm, the steady pace of oxen pulling, the coordination of hand and eye and muscle memory. Rowing demands the same patience. His body learns the motion. His hands callous over, old farmers' calluses replaced by new sailors' wounds. In the evenings, he writes letters home, though he knows his wife cannot read them, and will have to find someone in the village to decipher his crude script. He tells her about rowing on land, about the strange wooden ships that never touch water, about the Greek instructors who shout and curse in accented Latin. He does not tell her how frightened he is of drowning in armor, how the thought of the open sea fills him with a dread he cannot quite articulate. Instead, he writes about the harvest, asks if she has repaired the fence, reminds her to save seed grain for spring planting. He writes about familiar things because they are all that keeps him tethered to who he was before he became whatever he is becoming now. Meanwhile, in workshops near the shipyards, a different kind of problem occupies a different kind of Roman mind. Lucius comes from a family of architects and engineers, Romans who built aqueducts and roads, who understood mathematics and leverage and the practical application of Greek geometric principles. He has been tasked with solving an impossible equation. How do you make Roman sailors, who will never match Carthaginian expertise, competitive in naval warfare? The answer cannot be better seamanship. That takes decades. The answer cannot be faster ships. Roman vessels, built hastily from green timber by inexperienced shipwrights, will never match Carthaginian. Speed and maneuverability. The answer must be something else, something that negates Carthaginian advantages entirely. Lucius works with models, small wooden ships he can manipulate on a table. The traditional naval battle involves ramming. The attacker builds speed, aims the bronze ram at the enemy's hull, strikes below the waterline. The victim ship floods and sinks. This requires perfect timing, perfect aim, perfect coordination between rowers and helmsmen. Romans will never achieve that level of precision, not in the time available. But what if the battle is not about ramming? What if Roman ships do not need to be faster or more maneuverable? What if they can make the battle about something Romans are good at? The idea emerges slowly, through iteration and refinement. A boarding device, a bridge that can extend from the Roman ship to the enemy vessel. Lock them together, let Roman soldiers cross and fight hand to hand. Naval warfare becomes land warfare, and in land warfare, Rome has never lost. Lucius sketches the design on wax tablets, calculates weight and leverage. The device must be long enough to span the gap between ships, narrow enough to deploy quickly, strong enough to hold against the sea's motion, and it needs something to lock onto the enemy deck to prevent the Carthaginian ship from simply rowing away. He designs a spike, iron, shaped like a bird's beak. The spike will punch through planking when the bridge drops. The two ships will be held together whether the Carthaginians want it or not. He calls it the corvus, the raven, a scavenger bird that lands on carrion and tears flesh. The name appeals to his sense of dark humor. The Carthaginians think Romans are scavengers, barbarians picking at the edges of civilized Mediterranean culture. Very well, let them think that. The raven will teach them otherwise. The prototype is built and tested. It works, more or less. The bridge drops, the spike penetrates wood, the connection holds. But the device is heavy, mounted high on the ship's prow. Lucius knows this will make the vessels top-heavy, knows it will affect stability in rough seas. There's not time to perfect the design, not time to solve every problem. The device must be good enough, and good enough will have to suffice. As summer turns toward autumn in the year 260, the impossible begins to take shape. The fleet is actually materializing, 120 ships, crude and hasty but functional. The corvus devices are installed on the prows, standing vertical like strange mechanical birds. The crews have learned to row in rough unison, if not perfect coordination. It is not what anyone would call a proper navy, but it is something. It might be enough. Then comes the moment when theory meets reality. The fleet must sail to Sicily. Consul Gnaeus Cornelius Scipio Asina takes command of the first ships to depart. He is eager, perhaps too eager, burning with the desire to prove himself and his family name. The Scipios are old Roman nobility, generals and consuls going back generations. Gnaeus Cornelius Scipio Asina means to add naval glory to that distinguished lineage. Word reaches him that Lipara, a strategic island north of Sicily, might be turned through negotiation. The city there is wavering in its loyalty to Carthage. With the right pressure, the right promises, it could open its harbor to Roman forces. Scipio sees the opportunity and rushes toward it, taking 17 ships ahead of the main fleet. He sails directly into disaster. Hannibal Gisco, commanding the Carthaginian fleet from his base at Panormus, has prepared an ambush. He knows the Romans are coming, knows they are inexperienced, knows they can be caught. When Scipio's small squadron enters Lippur's harbor at dawn, Carthaginian ships appear from every direction, surrounding the Romans in the enclosed space. Scipio's crews panic. They have barely learned to row in formation on open water. Here, in the confusion of a harbor ambush, they are helpless. The Roman ships collide with each other, oars tangle, orders dissolve into chaos. Not a single Roman weapon is drawn. Without fighting, without even attempting resistance, they surrender. All 17 ships are captured. Scipio himself is hauled aboard a Carthaginian vessel in chains. The news reaches the main Roman fleet like a thunderbolt. Their first naval action before any battle has been fought is a complete humiliation. The Carthaginians laugh from one end of the Mediterranean to the other. The Romans have built a navy, and it surrendered without a fight. In Carthage, the story spreads through the markets and taverns. The farmers tried to play sailor. It ended exactly as expected. But in the Roman camp at Messana, where the remaining fleet is gathered, Gaius Duilius receives the news and makes a different calculation. His colleague Scipio has been captured. Someone must command the fleet. The duty falls to Duilius, the other consul for the year 260. He is not from an ancient family. He is a novus homo, a new man, the first of his line to reach the consulship. He has no ancestors who commanded legions, no family tradition of military glory. What he has is competence and nerve. Duilius stands on the deck of what will be his flagship, looking out at the assembled fleet. 100 ships remaining, each equipped with the strange corvus devices. The crews are shaken but intact. They trained for months, they learned to row, they have not yet fought. Scipio's disaster came from rushing ahead stupidly, from ignoring basic military caution. That failure does not invalidate the fleet itself. Duilius makes his decision. He will not hide in port. He will seek battle. The Carthaginians think Romans are fools. Let them think that. Let them come close with their superior ships and their confident crews. Let them close to ramming distance. And when they do, the ravens will drop. Morning arrives at Mylae with the particular stillness that precedes violence. The sun breaks the horizon, painting the water in shades of copper and rose. The Roman fleet lies at anchor in the sheltered bay, 103 vessels after the loss at Lipara. Aboard each ship, men check their equipment with the careful attention of those who know this might be their last morning. Marcus runs his thumb along the edge of his gladius, testing the sharpness. The blade is good Roman iron, properly maintained. Around him, his shipmates perform similar rituals. One man adjusts the straps of his armor. Another wraps his hands in cloth strips, extra protection for the rowing ahead. No one speaks much. There is nothing left to say. On the deck above, Gaius Duilius stands at the prow of his flagship, watching the eastern horizon. He has been awake since before dawn, unable to sleep with what is coming. His hand rests on the base of the corvus device, feeling the solid wood. So much depends on this contraption of timber and iron. So much depends on whether the theory translates to practice, whether the device will actually work when ships are moving and men are dying. He has reviewed the plan until it lives in his mind like a physical thing. His captains know their orders. The crews have drilled until the movements are automatic. Now there is only the waiting. Word arrives with the sun fully risen. Scouts report sails on the northern horizon. The Carthaginian fleet is approaching from Panormus. Hannibal Gisco has received intelligence that the Roman fleet is at Mylae. He is coming to finish what he started at Lipara. Duilius receives the report with a slight nod. He turns to his signalman. Raise the flags. All ships prepare for battle. The Roman fleet comes alive with sudden purpose. Sails that had been raised for the night anchorage now tumble down to be stowed. Battle standards run up masts, red and gold against the morning sky. Aboard each vessel, the Kelliustes takes his position at the rowing master's station. The crews settle onto their benches, gripping the massive oars. Marcus finds his place among the rowers in the third bank, the position he has occupied through all the months of training. The wood of the bench is smooth under his hands, worn by countless practice sessions. He plants his feet, ready to push and pull in the rhythm that has become second nature. The Carthaginian fleet appears as a line of darkness against the bright horizon. 130 ships in formation, their approach perfect and beautiful in its precision. Each vessel moves in harmony with its neighbors, oars rising and falling with mechanical regularity. These are not farmers learning to row. These are professionals, men who have done this their entire lives. On the lead ship, Hannibal Gisco surveys the waiting Roman fleet with satisfaction mixed with mild surprise. They did not flee. After Lipara, he half expected them to hide in port. Instead, here they are, drawn up as if they intend to fight. Admirable in its way, this Roman stubbornness. Foolish, but admirable. Gisco's officers gather around him on the command deck. One points at the Roman ships, at the strange wooden structures mounted on each prow. What are those devices? Gisco squints across the diminishing distance. Some kind of boarding apparatus, perhaps? The Romans are infantry fighters. Maybe they think they can turn sea battles into land battles. The thought is absurd enough that he almost smiles. Naval combat is about speed and maneuver. You ram the enemy before they can board you. You approach from angles they cannot defend. 3 centuries of Carthaginian naval supremacy have proved these principles beyond question. Still, caution might be warranted. Gisco orders his fleet into their traditional battle formation. The ships extend into a long line, each vessel positioned to support its neighbors while maintaining the flexibility to maneuver independently. The strategy is proven and simple. They will row past the Roman line, using their superior speed to approach from behind or from the sides. The bronze rams will punch through Roman hulls below the waterline. The crewed enemy vessels will flood and sink. The battle will be over by midday, and tonight they will celebrate in Panormus with the knowledge that Roman naval pretensions have been permanently crushed. The distance closes. 300 paces. 200. The morning air fills with the sound of oars cutting water, the creak of timber under stress, the faint calls of officers issuing orders. On the Roman ships, the Marines have moved to their assault positions near the corvus devices. They wear full armor despite the heat, despite the knowledge that armor means drowning if they fall into the sea. Each ship carries 120 Marines, crowded onto decks designed for 50. This is the gamble. If the corvus works, the numbers will matter. If it fails, the ships will be slow and top-heavy, easy targets for Carthaginian rams. Marcus can see the enemy fleet now through the rowing ports. The ships are beautiful, he has to admit. Sleek hulls painted in reds and blues, bronze fittings that catch the sun, the ordered precision of their approach. For a moment, he feels the vast gap between Roman crudeness and Carthaginian sophistication. Then he remembers the corvus waiting on the deck above. Maybe sophistication is not what matters today. The first Carthaginian ships surge forward, breaking from the main line. They have chosen their targets, individual Roman vessels they will strike and destroy. The lead Carthaginian Quinquerem aims directly at Duilius's flagship, the bronze ram cutting through water like a blade. It is a calculated insult. Take the Roman commander's ship first, show them the futility of resistance. Then the corvus drops. The boarding bridge swings outward on its pivot, the counterweight system lowering it with controlled speed. The bridge falls across the gap between ships and slams onto the Carthaginian deck with a splintering crash. The iron spike on the underside punches through planking, biting deep into the structural timbers beneath. The two ships are locked together. The Carthaginian crew stares at this bridge that appeared from nowhere, this thing that has made their ship suddenly, impossibly immobile. Before they can process what has happened, Roman Marines charge across. They move in formation, even on the narrow bridge suspended above churning water, shields overlapping, gladi drawn. The first Romans hit the Carthaginian deck and immediately establish a bridgehead, shields up, pushing forward. More Marines pour across behind them, 120 Romans against 50 Carthaginian Marines. The Carthaginians fight well, trained and professional, but they are overwhelmed by sheer numbers. The Romans fight with the brutal efficiency of infantry combat, stabbing low under shields, pushing enemies back into the rowing benches where there is no room to maneuver. Across the battlefield, more corvus devices drop. The sound becomes a rhythm of its own, the crash of boarding bridges punctuating the chaos. Each time a corvus locks onto a Carthaginian ship, the tactical situation inverts. The Carthaginians built their strategy on speed and maneuver. Suddenly, their ships cannot maneuver at all. They are trapped, held fast by iron spikes and Roman determination, and the soldiers pouring onto their decks are the finest infantry in the Mediterranean world. Hannibal Gisco, on his command ship, sees his battle plan disintegrating. The leading 30 ships of his fleet are engaged, and every single one is locked in boarding combat. His captains are trying to adapt, ordering their ships to approach from angles where the corvus cannot reach. But the devices pivot. They swing to meet attacks from any direction. The Roman engineers thought of everything. Gisco feels something he has rarely experienced in decades of naval command. He feels the cold touch of genuine fear. His own ship has closed with a Roman vessel, intending to ram. The enemy ship turns at the last moment, poorly but adequately. The ram misses the hull. And then the corvus drops onto Gisco's command deck. The spike penetrates with a sound like a tree splitting. Romans charge across. Gisco draws his sword, an ornate blade that has seen more ceremonial use than combat. Around him, his marines form a defensive line, shields up. They fight well. They hold for perhaps 5 minutes. Then, the sheer weight of Roman numbers breaks them. Gisco sees his men being cut down, sees the battle is lost, makes the decision that will save his life and destroy his reputation. He runs. There's a small boat, a captain's tender, secured to the stern. Gisco and 2 of his personal guards fight their way through the chaos, reach the boat, cut it free. They drop into the small craft and row desperately away from the flagship. Behind them, Romans swarm over the captured vessel, and the standard of Carthage is torn down and replaced with Roman colors. Gisco rows with his guards, 3 men in a boat built for 2, pulling away from the battle and toward the open sea. He does not look back. He cannot bear to see what is happening to his fleet. The battle continues through the morning. Some Carthaginian ships manage to avoid the corvus by attacking from the stern, ramming Roman vessels from behind where the boarding device cannot reach. A few Roman ships are holed and begin to take on water. Their crews work desperately at the pumps, trying to keep ahead of the flooding. But for every Roman vessel damaged, 3 Carthaginian ships are captured. The mathematics are brutal and simple. The corvus works. It works better than anyone, Roman or Carthaginian, believed possible. By late morning, the Carthaginian fleet breaks. The remaining ships, perhaps 80 vessels that manage to avoid engagement, turn and flee. They have the speed to escape. The Roman ships, heavy and slow, cannot pursue effectively. But the battle is over. 50 Carthaginian vessels remain behind, 30 captured in the initial chaos, 20 more taken during the subsequent melee. The water around Mylae is littered with debris, broken oars, bodies. The air smells of blood and salt and burning, because some of the damaged ships have caught fire from overturned lamps. Marcus sits on his rowing bench, exhausted though he never left the ship. The Marines who crossed to fight return now, bloodied and weary, helping wounded comrades back across the boarding bridge. The corvus still pins the captured Carthaginian ship to their own hull. Someone will have to figure out how to release it, how to separate the vessels. For now, the 2 ships remain locked together, rising and falling with the swells. On the command deck, Duilius surveys the battlefield with the expression of a man who has just witnessed something he can barely believe. They won. The Roman fleet, in its first major engagement, defeated the greatest naval power in the Mediterranean. He won. He, Gaius Duilius, the new man with no family glory to his name, just commanded Rome's first naval victory. The magnitude of it settles over him slowly. This changes everything. This changes the war. This changes Rome itself. But as he watches his crews beginning the work of securing the captured vessels, bringing the wounded aboard for treatment, gathering the dead for burial, Duilius allows himself no celebration yet. Victory reveals its own problems. The captured Carthaginian ships are beautiful, sophisticated vessels. They also need to be sailed to friendly harbors. Roman crews who barely learned to row their own clumsy quinqueremes must now handle these elegant warships. He can already see the difficulties. One prize has drifted too close to shore and grounded on a sandbar. Another nearly collides with a Roman vessel because the crew does not know how to trim the sails properly. The wounded present another challenge. Roman casualties are relatively light, a few hundred. Dead and perhaps 1,000 wounded, far fewer than anyone expected. But there are not enough medical supplies, not enough bandages, not enough wine for cleaning wounds, not enough men trained in surgery. Some men will die of injuries that could have been saved with proper treatment. Duilius makes a note to address this in his report to the Senate. If Rome is going to be a naval power, it needs naval medical infrastructure. And then there are the prisoners. Thousands of Carthaginian sailors and marines, now captives. They sit on the decks of their former ships, disarmed and guarded by Roman soldiers. They watch their vessels being clumsily handled by the enemy. Some weep quietly. Others stare with blank expressions, still processing the impossible reversal that just occurred. They were winning. They have always won. The sea belongs to Carthage, except now it does not, and the world makes no sense anymore. The fleet limps toward Messana over the next 2 days. The journey that should take hours extends because of the captured prizes, the damaged vessels, the inexperienced crews struggling with unfamiliar ships. They make perhaps 20 miles on the first day, another 30 on the second. Finally, the harbor at Messana comes into view. The Roman garrison there sees the approaching fleet and at first does not understand what they are looking at. Those are Roman ships, but also Carthaginian vessels. The standards flying are Roman. What happened? Then the truth becomes clear, and the harbor erupts in celebration. Soldiers line the docks, cheering as the fleet enters. They have been fighting this war for 4 years, watching helplessly as Carthaginian ships resupplied enemy fortresses, knowing that Roman military superiority on land meant nothing if they could not control the sea. Now, impossibly, the sea has been contested. Now, Carthaginian ships fly Roman standards. Now, everything has changed. Duilius comes ashore to a mob of legionaries who hoist him onto their shoulders and carry him through the streets. He submits to the celebration with good grace, but his mind is already on the next problems. The Carthaginian fleet has retreated to Panormus. They will regroup. They will analyze what happened and develop countermeasures. More battles will come. This victory, as significant as it is, represents only the beginning of Rome's naval campaign. Fast ships depart Messana carrying news of the victory. They sail for Italy, for Rome itself, where the Senate must hear what transpired off Mylae. The journey takes days. The news arrives to a city that has been anxiously waiting for word from the fleet, expecting either a report of cautious success or more likely an account of disaster. No one in Rome expected total victory. When the messengers deliver their report, the Senate sits in stunned silence. 50 enemy ships captured or destroyed, the Carthaginian fleet scattered. Rome's first naval battle is a crushing triumph. After the initial shock passes, the celebration begins. This is the kind of victory that enters national mythology. The senators vote immediately for a triumph, the first naval triumph in Roman history. Gaius Duilius will return to Rome and be honored as no Roman has been honored before for achievements at sea. In Carthage, the news arrives with equally profound impact, but of a very different nature. The defeat sends shockwaves through the merchant oligarchy that rules the city. The strategy for the entire war has been predicated on Carthaginian naval supremacy. Control the sea, resupply the Sicilian fortresses, gradually wear down Roman enthusiasm for the conflict. Eventually, Rome will tire of the war and negotiate. Carthage can keep most of its Sicilian possessions. The Mediterranean remains a Carthaginian lake. Except now the lake has been challenged. Now Roman ships have proved they can fight Carthaginian vessels and win. The merchant princes panic. In the Carthaginian Senate, voices rise in anger and fear. Someone must be held accountable. Hannibal Gisco, who escaped the battle in a small boat, returns to Carthage expecting recriminations, but hoping for another command, another chance to redeem himself. He does not get it. The Senate recalls him and assigns blame for the disaster. The execution order is swift. Sources differ on whether Gisco was formally tried and executed by the state or killed by his own men, but all agree on the outcome. Within weeks of the battle, Hannibal Gisco is dead, punished for incompetence and failure. Meanwhile, word of the battle spreads across the Mediterranean. In Syracuse, King Hero II, who has been carefully neutral or sometimes aligned with Carthage, recalculates his position. Rome is now a serious naval power. Perhaps it is time to formalize an alliance with the rising force rather than the declining one. In the Greek cities of southern Italy and the islands scattered across the sea, rulers and oligarchs make similar calculations. The balance of power is shifting. Rome, which was a regional Italian power just a few years ago, is becoming something more. Duilius returns to Rome in the autumn of 260. The triumph is spectacular. He rides in a chariot through streets lined with citizens who cheer until their voices go hoarse. Behind the chariot, captured Carthaginian weapons and standards are paraded. Prisoners walk in chains, the first Carthaginian captives of free birth Rome has ever taken at sea. The procession winds through the city to the Forum, where a special monument has been prepared, the rostral column, a marble pillar decorated with the bronze rams taken from captured Carthaginian ships. The inscription is carved for permanence, recording for all future generations that Gaius Duilius captured 31 ships, sank 13, and took 2,100,000 sesterces in gold and silver. The first Roman to command a naval triumph. The Senate grants him additional honors. He may be accompanied by a torchbearer and flute player when walking the streets at night, a privilege normally reserved for religious processions. It is strange and unprecedented, but then everything about this victory is unprecedented. Rome has entered the naval sphere, and there is no going back. Yet, as the celebration reaches its peak, as Duilius acknowledges the cheers and accepts the honors, a messenger pushes through the crowd to reach the Senate. He carries urgent dispatches from Sicily. Carthage has not conceded. They are building a new fleet, even larger than the one defeated at Mylae. They have hired new commanders with strict orders to avoid Roman boarding tactics at all costs. The Carthaginians are adapting, learning, preparing to continue the war with renewed intensity. The celebration continues, but now with an undercurrent of tension. One battle has been won. The war extends ahead, longer and more costly than anyone imagined. Gaius Duilius, standing in the Forum as citizens cheer his name, understands this better than anyone. He won the first battle. Rome will need to win many more. The corvus proved its worth at Mylae, but the Carthaginians are not fools. They will find countermeasures, they will adapt their tactics. The next battle will be harder. The sun sets over Rome, painting the marble buildings in gold and shadow. The rostral column stands in the Forum, its bronze rams catching the last light. It is a monument to an impossible victory, to farmers who learned to row, and engineers who solved an unsolvable problem, and a commander who understood that sometimes the rules can be changed. But it is also a monument to a beginning, not an ending. The sea has been challenged. The war continues. The war continues. The months after Mylae flow into years, and the conflict neither side wanted becomes the grinding reality that consumes resources, lives, and the careful plans of generals and senators. Carthage adapts. Their commanders, chastened by the disaster at Mylae, develop new tactics specifically designed to counter the corvus. They attack from behind, aiming for Roman sterns where the boarding bridges cannot reach. They use their superior speed to strike and retreat before the Romans can respond. Some of these tactics work. Roman ships are sunk, crews drown. The corvus, which seemed invincible in its first deployment, proves to have limitations. But Rome's advantage lies not in the corvus alone, but in something more fundamental: industrial capacity. Every time Roman ships are destroyed, new vessels are built. The shipyards that constructed the first fleet in 60 days continue their work. Timber flows down from Italian forests in an endless stream. New crews are trained using the same methods that created the first generation of Roman sailors. Marcus, who rode at Mylae, now trains recruits on the wooden practice frames, teaching them the rhythm and coordination he once learned himself. The transformation from farmer to sailor to instructor represents in Ovid's miniature what is happening to Rome as a whole. Carthage, dependent on mercenaries and expensive professional crews, struggles to replace its losses. Each ship destroyed represents not just timber and bronze, but skilled sailors who cannot be quickly replaced. Each captured crew means experienced men lost to the Carthaginian fleet permanently. The mathematics of attrition favor Rome, though the cost is terrible on both sides. In the year 259, the Battle of Sulci is fought off the coast of Sardinia. Roman forces under the praetor Gaius Sulpicius Paterculus engage a Carthaginian fleet and win decisively. The corvus is used again, though by now Carthaginian commanders know to expect it and fight more cautiously. Still, the Roman victory expands the theater of war beyond Sicily. Sardinia begins to slip from Carthaginian control. The empire that Carthage built over centuries is being contested on multiple fronts. The next year brings the Battle of Tyndaris, a smaller engagement that nonetheless confirms a pattern. Romans and Carthaginians are now roughly equal at sea. The overwhelming superiority that Carthage enjoyed for 300 years has been neutralized in less than 4 years. The significance of this shift cannot be overstated. The Mediterranean is no longer Carthage's private lake. Trade routes that fed the Carthaginian economy are now threatened. Colonies that relied on naval protection must fend for themselves. The entire structure of the Punic Empire is being undermined. By 256, Rome feels confident enough to attempt what would have been unthinkable a few years earlier: an invasion of Africa itself. The Roman Senate authorizes the construction of an even larger fleet, 330 warships plus transports for a full consular army. The objective is to strike at Carthage directly, to threaten the enemy capital and force a decisive end to the war. It is the most ambitious naval operation Rome has ever attempted, and it requires everything the Republic has learned about sea power in the years since that desperate first fleet was built. The Carthaginians understand the threat. They assemble a fleet of 350 ships, their largest concentration of naval power since the disaster at Mylae. The two fleets meet off Cape Ecnomus on the southern coast of Sicily. What follows is possibly the largest naval battle in ancient history by the number of combatants involved. Nearly 700 ships engage, carrying approximately 300,000 men between rowers, marines, and sailors. The scale is almost incomprehensible. The battle unfolds with more sophistication than Mylae. Both sides have learned from 4 years of war. The Carthaginians attempt to break up the Roman formation through a feigned retreat, drawing the leading Roman squadrons away from their supports. The Romans counter by maintaining discipline and using their superior numbers to overwhelm Carthaginian flanking attempts. The corvus is still effective, but now it is one tool among many rather than the sole determinant of victory. Roman crews have become genuinely skilled sailors. They can maneuver in formation, execute complex commands, handle their ships in ways that would have been impossible in 260. The Battle of Ecnomus ends in Roman victory, though at significant cost. Carthage loses 100 ships captured or destroyed. Rome loses 24. The Roman invasion fleet proceeds to Africa and establishes a beachhead near Carthage itself. For a moment, it seems the war might end quickly. The Carthaginians, their capital threatened, sue for peace. The terms offered by the Roman commander, Marcus Attilius Regulus, are harsh, too harsh. Carthage decides to fight on rather than accept humiliation. What follows is one of history's great reversals. The Carthaginians hire a Spartan mercenary general named Xanthippus, who recognizes that Roman tactics work better at sea than on African plains. He assembles a force of infantry, cavalry, and war elephants, lures the Romans into a pitched battle, and crushes them. Regulus himself is captured. The Roman army in Africa is destroyed. The invasion ends in catastrophe. Rome sends a fleet to evacuate survivors, and another naval battle is fought off Cape Hermaeum. The Romans win the engagement, capturing 114 Carthaginian ships. But then, nature delivers a blow that neither side could have anticipated. The Roman fleet sailing back to Italy with the rescued survivors encounters a massive storm off the Sicilian coast. The corvus devices, mounted high on the ship's prows, make the vessels top-heavy. In rough seas, this instability becomes catastrophic. Ships capsize, others are driven onto rocks. When the storm clears, 284 Roman vessels are destroyed. Perhaps 100,000 men are dead. It is the worst naval disaster in ancient history. The corvus, which enabled Roman naval power, has also contributed to its greatest loss. The device that turned sea battles into land fights made ships vulnerable to the sea itself. The lesson is not lost on Roman commanders. Over the following years, the corvus is quietly phased out. As Roman crews become truly skilled sailors, they no longer need the boarding device. Ships are built or retrofitted without the heavy mechanism. By the end of the war, Roman vessels fight using traditional ramming tactics, but now with crews that match Carthaginian expertise. The war grinds on. Another massive storm in 249 destroys more Roman ships. The Battle of Drepana, in the same year, brings a rare Carthaginian naval victory when a Roman commander named Publius Claudius Pulcher ignores religious omens and attacks recklessly. His fleet is destroyed, and the legend persists that he threw the sacred chickens overboard when they refused to eat, saying that perhaps they would prefer to drink. The gods, it seems, were not amused, yet, for all these setbacks, Rome's fundamental advantages remain: the capacity to build new fleets, the willingness to absorb catastrophic losses and continue, the adaptability that allows them to learn from defeats and change their methods. Carthage, bleeding resources and unable to match Roman industrial output, gradually weakens. The merchant oligarchy that rules the city grows war-weary. The Senate debates increasingly desperate measures to fund the military campaigns that drain the treasury. By 243, after 21 years of continuous war, both sides are exhausted. But Rome finds the resources for one final effort. Wealthy citizens approached by the Senate provide loans to finance construction of a new fleet. 200 ships built to the latest designs, with experienced crews and no corvus devices. This fleet blockades the last Carthaginian strongholds in western Sicily, cutting off resupply routes. Carthage, equally desperate, assembles a relief fleet. The two forces meet on the 10th of March in 241 at the Aegates Islands off the western Sicilian coast. The battle is swift and decisive. The Carthaginian fleet is caught at a disadvantage, its crews hastily assembled and inadequately trained. The Roman fleet, by contrast, represents everything Rome has learned in 2 decades of naval warfare. The result is never in doubt. Over 100 Carthaginian ships are sunk or captured. The remainder flee. Carthage's naval power is broken. Without the ability to resupply their Sicilian garrisons, Carthage must negotiate. The peace treaty is signed later that year. Sicily is ceded to Rome, becoming the Republic's first overseas province. Carthage pays 3,200 talents of silver in reparations over 10 years. All claims to Roman allies are relinquished. The First Punic War is over. The consequences extend far beyond the immediate territorial and financial terms. Rome, which had no navy 23 years earlier, is now the dominant Mediterranean naval power. The infrastructure built during the war, the shipyards and training systems and supply networks, remains in place. Naval command becomes a prestigious assignment for ambitious Romans. The Senate must now think in terms of maritime strategy, of controlling sea lanes and protecting trade routes. The transformation from land power to naval power is complete. For Carthage, the defeat triggers immediate crisis. The mercenary armies that fought for Carthage in Sicily, unpaid and angry, revolt when they return to Africa. The mercenary war that follows nearly destroys the city. Carthage survives, but weakened and humiliated. The defeat drives Carthaginian expansion into Spain, ultimately setting the stage for the Second Punic War and the rise of Hannibal Barca, the brilliant general who will bring Rome to the edge of destruction a generation later. But that is another story. The First Punic War ends with Rome triumphant and forever changed. The farmers, who learned to row on dry land, the engineers who invented the corvus, the consul who trusted in innovation over tradition, all of them contributed to a transformation that shaped the course of Western history. Without Roman naval power, there would have been no unified Roman Mediterranean. Without the Mediterranean, there would have been no Roman Empire. Without the empire, the entire trajectory of European civilization would have been different. In the Roman Forum, The rostral column still stands, its bronze rams catching the sun. Romans gather there for public speeches and political rallies. The platform where orators address the crowd becomes known simply as the rostra, named for those captured ship beaks. For generations, young Romans grow up seeing that monument, hearing the story of how their ancestors defeated the greatest naval power in the world. The Battle of Mylae enters Roman cultural memory as an example of what determination and innovation can achieve. Marcus returns to his farm after the war. His military service is complete. He walks back into a life he left years ago, though he is not quite the same man who departed. His hands still know the rhythm of rowing even as they return to the plow. His children are older, his wife grayer, the farm smaller than he remembered. But it is home. He plants his crops and repairs his fences and lives quietly. Sometimes he thinks about the morning at Mylae, about the moment the corvus dropped and the world changed. Mostly he thinks about the harvest. Gaius Duilius serves in various capacities after his triumph, but never commands another fleet. He becomes censor in 258 and later serves as dictator to conduct elections. His naval victory remains his defining achievement. When he dies, likely in old age though the date is unrecorded, he is remembered as the first Roman to prove that the sea could be mastered. His rostral column outlasts him, surviving through the Republic, through the Empire, fragments of it preserved even into the modern era. Lucius, the engineer who designed the corvus, disappears from the historical record. His name is never recorded. The device he created is used for perhaps a decade before being quietly abandoned as Roman sailors outgrow their need for it. But the principle he demonstrated, that innovation can trump experience, that problems can be solved through creative thinking rather than traditional methods, that principle becomes part of Roman identity. Roman engineering, the aqueducts and roads and bridges that will span continents, all rest on the foundation of that same pragmatic problem-solving mentality. The corvus itself becomes a historical curiosity, a device that appears in ancient accounts and then vanishes. Modern historians debate its exact construction and effectiveness. Archaeological discoveries, including bronze rams recovered from ancient battle sites, provide some evidence, but leave many questions unanswered. What remains certain is the result. Rome built a navy from nothing and used it to defeat Carthage. How they accomplished that feat, the specific mechanisms and tactics, matters less than the simple fact that they did it. The lessons of Mylae extend beyond naval warfare. They speak to the broader question of how civilizations respond to unprecedented challenges. Rome faced a problem, Carthaginian naval supremacy, for which their entire military tradition offered no solution. They could have accepted defeat or negotiated a compromise peace. Instead, they learned. They adapted. They found people who knew what they did not know and listened to them. They copied what worked and invented new solutions where copying was insufficient. They turned their weakness into strength by changing the nature of the conflict itself. This pattern, this willingness to adapt and innovate, becomes characteristic of Roman expansion. When they encounter Greek phalanx tactics, they study and modify their own formations. When they face Hannibal's tactical genius, they endure defeats until they produce generals who can match him. When they conquer territories with more advanced cultures, they absorb and integrate useful elements while maintaining Roman identity. The empire that eventually spans from Britain to Mesopotamia is built on this foundation of pragmatic adaptability. Standing in the quiet waters off Mylae today, the sea peaceful under Mediterranean sun, it is easy to forget that history turned here. No monuments mark the spot. The ancient city is archaeological ruins. The ships and men who fought that morning are long dissolved into the currents that still flow between Sicily and the Italian mainland. But the consequences of that battle ripple forward through time, shaping the world that emerged from Roman dominance. The Carthaginians laughed at Rome's new navy. They saw crude ships and inexperienced crews and strange devices they did not understand. They assumed that tradition and expertise would prevail as they always had. They were wrong. By mid-morning, the laughter had stopped. By sunset, the ancient world belonged to those who dared to learn. The waters off Mylae flow on, timeless and indifferent to human ambition. But in those waters, on one morning in 260, the impossible became real. Farmers became sailors. Innovation defeated experience. Rome learned to sail, and the course of history changed forever. That is the lesson written in water and bronze and the bones of ships long since scattered to the sea floor. Human beings, when pressed by necessity and driven by determination, can learn anything, overcome anything, become anything they need to be. The corvus was abandoned within a generation, but the spirit behind it endures. Not the device itself, but what it represented. The willingness to see problems as puzzles to be solved rather than fates to be accepted. The courage to attempt the unprecedented. The wisdom to know that today's impossibility might be tomorrow's achievement. Those who stood on Roman decks that morning, watching Carthaginian ships approach with centuries of superiority behind them, could not have known they were creating a legacy that would outlast empires. They knew only that they had a device that might work and a determination to try. Sometimes that is enough.